You ever look at your life and think, damn, I've got it good? That was me.
I wasn't a billionaire or anything, but I had everything I needed: stable job, a nice house, and a wife I genuinely loved.
Her name was Emily. We'd been together for 8 years, married for 5.
We had that kind of easy, comfortable relationship where we knew each other's favorite coffee orders, could finish each other's sentences, and had a routine that just worked. We didn't have kids yet, but we had talked about it maybe in a year or two when things settled down at work for both of us. Emily was a journalist, and she had this fire in her that made her impossible not to admire.
Always chasing the next big story, always out late for work meetings or networking events. I never minded. I trusted her. Or at least, I used to. The first sign that something was wrong was small. Tiny, really. She started locking her phone. That wasn't like her. We were open about everything.
Not that I made a habit of checking her messages, but it was one of those things where if her phone was closer and mine wasn't, she wouldn't hesitate to ask me to text someone back for her.
Suddenly, she was being weird about it. If she left it on the table and I so much as glanced in its direction, she'd grab it, like I was about to hack into the Pentagon. I told myself it was nothing. Then, there was the perfume. Emily had always smelled like vanilla and something faintly floral, her signature scent. But one night, she came home smelling completely different. Like expensive cologne, almost musky. It was subtle, but enough to make me notice. New perfume? I asked as she shrugged off her coat. She hesitated. Yeah, something a coworker recommended. Ha! Smells different. She laughed, but it was forced. I'll stick to my usual, then. Another small thing. Another thing I told myself I was overthinking. But the third thing? That one stuck. Emily had been going to work dinners a lot more frequently than usual. She always had these late nights before, but she'd at least let me know when she'd be home. Lately, the texts had stopped coming. Just silence, then her stumbling in way later than usual, smelling like wine and whatever new perfume had become part of her routine. One night, I called her around 10, just to check in. It went straight to voicemail. Okay. Maybe she was still at dinner. Maybe she was in a loud place and didn't hear it. Then, at 11, I called again. Straight to voicemail. At 11:30, I sent a text. Everything okay? No response. Midnight. She walked through the door, hair a little messy, cheeks flushed. Oh my God, I didn't see your texts, she said, laughing. My phone died, and we were at this little hole-in-the-wall restaurant that didn't even have chargers. I nodded, but something nodded me. She pulled me into a kiss, but it felt rehearsed. That night, as I lay in bed next to her, staring at the ceiling, a single thought ran through my head. Something was wrong. I just didn't know how wrong. Yet, for the next few days, I tried to push the suspicion out of my mind. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself that Emily was just busy, that stress was making her act different, that maybe I was imagining things. But the more I tried to believe it, the more the cracks started to show. She was on her phone constantly, always tilting the screen away from me. Whenever I walked into the room, she'd quickly swipe away whatever she was looking at. At night, she took her phone into the bathroom instead of leaving it charging on the nightstand like she used to. I noticed other things too. The way she'd dress up a little more for work, put on lipstick even when she was just grabbing groceries. The way she seemed less interested in me, our conversations became shorter, more distant. Our usual Saturday morning coffee on the balcony became a quiet affair, like she was somewhere else in her head. And then there were the late nights. They were happening more often. It used to be once every few weeks, but now it was almost every other night. She'd come home late, sometimes tipsy, always with an excuse. Work meeting ran long, or God, you won't believe the traffic, or Melissa needed to vent about her breakup. At first, I believed her. But then I started to pay attention. The little details didn't add up. The stories changed. One night, she said she was with Melissa at a bar downtown, but when I casually asked Melissa about it a few days later, she looked confused and said she hadn't seen Emily all week. That was the first time I truly felt sick. I wanted to ignore it. I wanted to believe that it was a misunderstanding, that maybe I had misheard Emily or that Melissa just forgot. But something deep in my gut told me I was being played. So, I did something I never thought I would do. I started watching. Not in an obvious way, not in a way that would tip her off. I just started paying attention. I noted the time she left, the time she came back, the way she acted afterward. I watched her hands when she talked, if they fidgeted, if she avoided eye contact. I made mental notes of her excuses and checked for inconsistencies. And then, I went a step further. The next time she told me she was going to a work dinner, I waited 15 minutes after she left, grabbed my keys, and followed. I wasn't even sure what I was expecting to find. Maybe I'd see her at a restaurant, exactly where she said she'd be, laughing with coworkers over drinks. Maybe I'd feel stupid and guilty for doubting her. Maybe this would be the moment I'd realize I was just overthinking everything. But that's not what happened. I followed her car through the city, keeping a safe distance. She wasn't heading downtown, where most of her work events usually were. She wasn't going to a restaurant or a bar. She was heading toward the outskirts of town, a quieter area where there weren't many businesses. And then she pulled into a hotel parking lot. I felt my stomach drop. I parked across the street, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breathing was shallow. My heart pounded against my ribs like it was trying to escape. She sat in her car for a minute, checking her phone. Then she stepped out. She looked around, quick, cautious glances, and then walked toward the side entrance of the hotel. I sat there, frozen. I wanted to believe there was another explanation. Maybe she was meeting a source for a story. Maybe she was interviewing someone. Maybe. And then, I saw him. A man stepped out from the same side entrance. He was tall, well-dressed, maybe a little younger than me. He looked around just like she did, checking to see if anyone was watching. Then, without hesitation, he leaned in and kissed her. A long, slow, familiar kiss. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. I just sat there, staring, as everything I thought I knew about my life shattered right in front of me. Emily laughed, soft, affectionate, before they disappeared inside together. I don't know how long I sat there. Maybe minutes. Maybe hours. My mind refused to process what I had just seen. My body felt numb, my thoughts tangled and chaotic. I wanted to believe this wasn't real, that I had misread the situation, that maybe there was another explanation. But there wasn't. I had seen it with my own eyes. Emily was cheating on me. And suddenly, every late night, every weird excuse, every strange behavior made sense. It wasn't just a work dinner. It wasn't just stress. It wasn't just my imagination. She was sleeping with another man. And I had just watched her walk into a hotel with him. My first reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't even sadness. It was pure, cold shock. Like my body hadn't caught up with reality yet. Like my brain was refusing to process it fully. I sat there in my car, staring at the hotel entrance, waiting for some kind of feeling to hit me. Rage, sorrow, betrayal, something. But I felt nothing. Just emptiness. After a while, I forced myself to move. I grabbed my phone, my hands shaking, and snapped a few photos of the entrance. I didn't know why. Maybe for proof. Maybe just because I needed to do something. Then I drove home. The entire ride back was a blur. My thoughts were racing, but they were disorganized, tangled. I didn't know what to do. Do I confront her? Do I wait? Do I pretend like I don't know until I figure out my next move? By the time I pulled into the driveway, I had made my decision. I wasn't going to say anything. Not yet. I needed to be smart about this. I needed to know everything before I made my move. So when Emily came home later that night, just after midnight, her hair slightly messy, her lips a little swollen. I didn't say a word. I played my part. I acted normal. Because now, this wasn't just about my marriage. This was about me. And I wasn't going to let her destroy my life without a fight. The night after I watched Emily walk into that hotel with another man, I didn't sleep. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, listening to the soft, steady rhythm of her breathing beside me. She had come home late, as expected, slipping under the covers without a care in the world. She even kissed my cheek before rolling over. Like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't just spent the night in another man's bed. I wanted to shake her awake and scream at her. I wanted to demand answers. But I knew that if I acted impulsively, she'd lie. She'd cry. She'd manipulate. No. I wasn't going to let her control the story. I needed a plan. So the next morning, I acted normal. Or as normal as I could. I made coffee, kissed her goodbye when she left for work, and waited until she was gone before I got to work. First, I called my lawyer. I wasn't ready to file for divorce yet, but I needed to know my options. We had assets, a house, joint accounts. I wasn't going to let her blindside me. The lawyer gave me some advice: gather evidence, don't tip her off, and start separating finances discreetly. I hung up and took a deep breath. Then, I went digging. Emily had always been careful, but nobody is perfect. I started with her laptop, but she had a password on it. That wasn't new, but now it felt sinister. Her tablet? Also locked. Her phone was the real prize, but she never left it unattended for more than a few minutes. But there was one thing she had forgotten. Her smartwatch. She had left it charging on the kitchen counter, completely unlocked. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I navigated to her messages and saw a thread with a contact saved under work: a weak disguise. And there it was. Explicit messages. Plans. Pet names. A full conversation from last night. Him: I miss you already. Emily: last night was amazing. Wish I could wake up next to you. Him: soon. He won't suspect anything. Emily: I don't know. He was acting weird last night. I think he might be catching on. My blood ran cold. She knew. She knew I was onto her. And she was still going to keep lying. I scrolled up, scanning weeks' worth of messages, my stomach churning with every word. They had been together for months. Maybe longer. They had a routine, planned their meetups carefully, even joked about me being clueless. I put the watch down, forcing myself to breathe. It took every ounce of self-control not to throw it against the wall. Instead, I took screenshots, sent them to myself, and deleted the evidence. If she thought I was clueless, I was going to use that to my advantage. I needed her to confess. The setup. That night, I planned our date night. Emily had been avoiding intimacy for a while, but tonight, I needed to draw her in. To get her comfortable. So I cooked her favorite meal, poured wine, and made it seem like I was making an effort. She smiled when she came home, kissed me on the cheek, and said, "This is sweet, babe." It took everything in me not to recoil at her touch. We sat across from each other, eating, drinking, talking, just like we used to. I played my role perfectly, nodding at her stories, laughing at her jokes. But inside, I was preparing for war. Halfway through dinner, I casually asked, "So, how was work today?" She didn't even flinch. Busy. Meetings, emails, the usual. Any late nights coming up? I asked, sipping my wine. She hesitated. Yeah, probably. You know how it is. I forced a smile. Yeah. I do. She had no idea what was coming. The trap. After dinner, I suggested we watch a movie. She agreed, curling up beside me on the couch. She had no idea I had hidden my phone nearby, recording everything. I let the silence stretch before finally saying, "Em, can I ask you something?" She looked at me, slightly wary. Of course. I took a deep breath.
Are you happy? Her brows furrowed. What? In our marriage, I clarified. Are you happy? She exhaled, looking away. That's a loaded question. But an honest one, I pressed. She was quiet for a moment before saying, I love you, Steve. But I think we've been distant lately. And I don't know how to fix it. I nodded, acting thoughtful. Maybe honesty would help. She tensed. What do you mean? I turned to her, my expression calm. I know, Emily. Her face paled. Know what? That you're cheating on me. Silence. A thick, suffocating silence. Then, she laughed, forced, nervous. Steve, what the hell are you talking about? I pulled out my phone and played the recording. Her face twisted as she heard her own voice, her own words admitting to sneaking around. How long? I asked, my voice eerily calm. She opened her mouth, closed it, and looked away. I don't know. Don't lie to me. She swallowed. 6 months. 6 months. I nodded slowly, gripping my hands together to keep them from shaking. Who is he? She hesitated. Don't make me ask again. She sighed. His name is Matt. I exhaled sharply. And what is Matt to you? A fling? A boyfriend? What? I don't know. I laughed, bitter and hollow. You don't know? She wiped at her eyes. Steve, I never wanted to hurt you. Stop. I held up a hand. Don't insult me with that bullshit. She flinched. Do you love him? She didn't answer. I nodded, feeling the final pieces of my heart crack apart. All right, I said, standing up. Wait, Steve. Save it, I snapped. I don't need your excuses. Her voice trembled. Are you leaving? I turned to face her. Not yet. But I am divorcing you. Her breath hitched. Please. Don't do this. Don't do this? I repeated, laughing bitterly. Emily, you did this. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. 4 months, she had lied to me. Betrayed me. Now, she was finally feeling the weight of her choices. I walked to the bedroom, grabbed a suitcase, and started packing. She followed, panicked. Steve, please, we can fix this. I zipped the suitcase shut. No. You broke this. I'm just walking away from the wreckage. And just like that, the confrontation was over. She begged. She pleaded. But I didn't care anymore. Because now, this wasn't about saving our marriage. It was about saving myself. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the guest room, formerly the junk room, the one we always said we'd turn into a home office but never got around to it. I hadn't taken everything from our bedroom, just enough clothes to last me a while. I refused to sleep in the same bed where she had probably laid, thinking about him. Emily had tried to talk to me again, knocking on the door softly, calling my name. When I didn't answer, she had finally given up, retreating to the bedroom, the real bedroom, where I imagined she was lying awake, panicked, scrambling for ways to fix this. I didn't want to hear her excuses. I didn't want her to cry and tell me she loved me, because I knew now love isn't supposed to feel like this. At some point in the early morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number, hey Steve. I think we need to talk. I stared at the message. I didn't recognize the number. But I knew exactly who it was. Matt. I gripped my phone so tight my knuckles ached. The audacity. The sheer, unbelievable audacity. I took a deep breath, my mind racing. Did I respond? Did I call him and let loose all the rage that had been boiling inside me for weeks? Did I meet him somewhere and knock his teeth out? I wasn't the kind of guy who got violent. I had never thrown a punch in my life. But in that moment, I wanted to hurt him. Instead, I took a breath and typed back. Me, talk about what?
His reply came instantly.
Matt, look, man. I didn't mean for things to happen this way. I almost threw my phone across the room. Didn't mean for things to happen? Oh, what, you accidentally tripped and landed in bed with my wife?
I took a moment to calm myself, then responded.
Me, you knew she was married. You knew what you were doing. Matt, yeah. I did. But I also know Emily's not happy. And I think you know that too. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. This guy was actually trying to justify it. Me, so you thought screwing her behind my back would help? Matt, no. But I'm not gonna lie to you, Steve. I love her. There it was.
I stared at the words on my screen, my vision blurring from exhaustion and fury. I read them again, just to make sure I hadn't imagined it.
I love her. I felt something inside me snap. This wasn't just some fling to him. He loved her. And what about Emily? Did she love him back? I didn't ask. I didn't need to.
I had already seen the answer in the way she hesitated when I asked her last night.
I locked my phone and placed it face down on the desk. I could do something with this. I could destroy them both. The plan. For the next few hours, I thought about revenge. I thought about exposing her. Sending those screenshots to her family, her coworkers. I had enough evidence to ruin her professionally and personally.
I thought about calling Matt's job if he had one and telling them everything.
Showing up at his apartment, embarrassing him in front of his neighbors. Or maybe something simpler. A public confrontation. A loud, humiliating spectacle that neither of them would ever recover from. God, it was tempting.
But then, I thought about what my lawyer had told me.
Be smart. Move first. Don't let emotions control you. So instead of acting on impulse, I called my lawyer again. Steve, he answered groggily. It's 6 in the morning. I want to file for divorce. That woke him up. You sure? Positive. Okay, he said. Then let's do this right. Are you still in the house? Yeah. Then don't leave yet. Not until we secure your assets. And just like that, I had a new plan. Not one of destruction. Not one of chaos. One of control. The execution. Emily barely spoke to me that morning.
She looked exhausted, her eyes puffy, her movements sluggish. She didn't know what to say, and honestly, I didn't care. I ate my breakfast in silence, then got to work. First, I went to the bank and opened a new account in my name only. Then, I withdrew half the money from our joint account and moved it over. Not out of spite. Just to protect myself. Next, I met with my lawyer in person.
I want the house, I told him. Do you think she'll fight you for it? Probably, I admitted. But I bought it. I pay for it. I want to keep it. He nodded.
Then we'll make that the priority. We spent the next hour mapping out the legal side of things.
Once everything was in place, I sent Emily a text. Me, we need to talk. I'll be home in an hour.
She responded immediately.
Emily, okay. I could almost feel the desperation in that single word. She knew what was coming. The final conversation.
When I walked through the door, Emily was sitting on the couch, wringing her hands together.
Steve.
I filed for divorce. The words landed like a slap. Her mouth fell open.
You what? I filed for divorce, I repeated. And before you start begging or making excuses, I want to make something clear. This isn't just about the cheating. This is about you. The lying. The betrayal. The fact that you would have kept doing this for God knows how long if I hadn't found out. Tears welled in her eyes. I didn't want to lose you. You lost me the second you walked into that hotel. She wiped at her face. I don't even know who I am without you. I stared at her, feeling nothing. Once, I would have broken at those words. I would have comforted her. But now? Now, I just wanted her out of my life. You should have thought about that before you threw everything away. She sobbed, her whole body shaking. I love you, Steve. I didn't even blink. No, I said. You don't. Silence. She looked at me like she wanted to say something else. Maybe she wanted to beg me to stay. Maybe she wanted to promise she'd fix it. But I had already made my choice. Steve, please. Can't we at least try? I shook my head. No. It's over, Emily. She broke down completely then, her face buried in her hands. I didn't comfort her. I didn't touch her. I just turned, grabbed my keys, and walked out the door. I had one. Not through revenge. Not through anger. But by taking back control. I thought walking out that door would be the end of it. That I had made my choice, closed the chapter, and could finally breathe again. But life doesn't work like that. Divorce isn't a magic wand that makes pain disappear. It's a slow, brutal process. One that drags out every ugly, bitter emotion you thought you had already conquered. Emily didn't just roll over and accept it. No. She fought. Not in the way I expected, though. She didn't scream, didn't get angry, didn't even try to deny it. She begged. For days, she flooded my phone with messages. Emily, Steve, please, I don't want to lose you. Emily, can we talk? Just one last time? Emily, I'll do anything. Just tell me what you need. I ignored them at first. Then she started calling. When I didn't answer, she left voicemails. Sometimes she was crying. Sometimes she was eerily calm. But the message was always the same. She wanted to fix it. But there was no fixing this. I had already moved into a temporary apartment. My lawyer had already served her the divorce papers. There was no reversing it now. And yet, something kept me from blocking her number. Maybe I wanted to hear her suffer. Maybe some dark part of me enjoyed knowing she was drowning in regret. Or maybe, just maybe, I needed one last conversation too. The meeting. After a week of silence, I finally gave in. I sent her a message. Me, fine. One last talk. Tomorrow. 6 p.m. Neutral ground. She responded in seconds. Emily, okay. Just tell me where. I chose a coffee shop downtown. Somewhere public. Somewhere I could leave if I needed to. When I arrived, she was already there. She looked rough. Not in the dramatic, falling apart way you see in movies. But her eyes were hollow, her hair tied back in a way that looked more like she didn't care than an intentional style. She stood when she saw me, hesitated, then sat back down. I took the seat across from her. For a moment, we just stared at each other. Then, she spoke. I don't even know where to start. I folded my arms. Start with the truth. She exhaled shakily. I already told you the truth. No. You told me some of the truth, I corrected. Now tell me the rest. She swallowed. What do you want to know? Why? She flinched, as if she had hoped I wouldn't ask. I don't know. Bullshit. Her head snapped up, eyes red-rimmed. I don't, Steve. I swear to God, I don't. It wasn't planned. It just happened. I laughed, sharp and bitter. Oh, yeah. You just accidentally fell into bed with another man. Makes perfect sense. She wiped at her eyes. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I pressed. Help me understand, Em. How do you go from kissing me goodnight to sneaking into hotel rooms with him?
She hesitated, her fingers twisting in her lap.
I felt empty. I blinked. Empty? She nodded, biting her lip. I don't know when it started. Maybe a year ago. Maybe longer. But something changed in me. In us. And I didn't know how to fix it. So instead of talking to me, you cheated?
I tried talking, she insisted. But every time I brought it up, she stopped herself.
I leaned forward. I just what? She hesitated. You just brushed it off, she admitted. You always made everything seem fine. Like there was nothing wrong. I frowned. Because I thought we were fine, Emily. You never told me you were unhappy. You never gave me a chance to fix it.
Tears slipped down her cheeks.
I know. And I hate myself for it. Silence settled between us.
For the first time, I saw something real in her eyes. Something beyond guilt and desperation.
Regret. Not just for getting caught. But for everything. Matt was easy, she whispered. He made me feel wanted. Exciting. Alive. I clenched my jaw. And I didn't? She looked devastated. It wasn't about you. That's a cop-out. I know. I exhaled, rubbing my temples. What do you want from me, Em?
She hesitated, then said the words I had been dreading.
I want you to stay.
I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. She reached across the table, her fingers hovering near mine.
Steve, I know I screwed up. I know I hurt you in the worst way. But I can't lose you. I don't want to be with him. I never did. Her voice cracked. I just lost myself. I pulled my hand away. You already lost me. Her breath hitched. Please. I shook my head. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have done this.
She closed her eyes, shoulders trembling.
But I do, she whispered. I stood up. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do.
I leaned down, just enough so she could hear me over the hum of the coffee shop.
Then you'll have to learn to live with the loss. I turned and walked away. I didn't look back.
The unexpected encounter.
I should have felt lighter. Walking away should have felt like closure. But the universe wasn't done with me yet. Because as soon as I stepped outside, I heard a voice. Steve. I turned. And there he was. Matt.
Standing on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, looking nervous.
I exhaled sharply.
You've got some balls, showing up here.
He shifted awkwardly. I wasn't trying to. He hesitated. I saw you go in. I figured you were talking to Emily. I crossed my arms. So what? You came to check on her?
No, he said quickly.
I wanted to talk to you. I laughed. Oh, this should be good. He swallowed. Look, I know you hate me. And you have every right to. But I need you to know something. I waited. I ended it. I blinked. What? With Emily, he clarified. A few days ago. I told her I couldn't do it anymore.
I studied him, searching for deception.
Why? His jaw tightened. Because I realized something. If she could do this to you, her husband, the man she built a life with, then what's stopping her from doing it to me?
For the first time, I saw it.
Fear. Regret. And just like that, I realized something. I wasn't the only one she had betrayed. Matt had been played, too. And I had wasted too much energy hating him. I took a deep breath. You did me a favor, I said. He looked surprised. I did? Yeah. I met his gaze.
You set me free. And with that, I walked away. For real, this time. I expected relief. I thought that once I walked away from Emily and from Matt, once I had said everything that needed to be said, that I would feel free. But freedom doesn't come overnight. Freedom doesn't erase the memories. Freedom doesn't silence the questions that keep you up at night, or the moments where you wake up thinking, for just a second, that everything is still the way it used to be. And when the realization crashes down on you all over again, it's like reliving the betrayal for the first time. That's what the next few weeks were like. A cycle of remembering. A cycle of second-guessing. A cycle of trying to figure out who I even was without Emily. Because for 8 years, she had been my person. My partner. My constant. And now? Now I was just some guy sitting in a half-furnished apartment, staring at a divorce settlement, wondering how the hell I ended up here. The divorce process. Emily didn't fight me. Not for the house. Not for the money. Not for anything. She signed the papers within a week, agreeing to everything my lawyer had laid out. If I hadn't known better, I would have thought she was eager to get rid of me. But I did know better. She wasn't fighting because she thought giving me what I wanted would change something. She still thought she could win me back. I could see it in her texts, the ones I ignored. Emily, I signed everything. If this is what you want, I won't fight you. Emily, I still love you, Steve. Emily, please don't shut me out completely. I just want to talk. I never responded. She had her last conversation. She had her closure. I wasn't going to give her any more. The divorce was finalized 3 months after I filed. By then, I had moved all my things into the new apartment, cut off all contact with Emily, and focused on rebuilding my life. I thought that would be enough. I thought I was handling it well. But grief doesn't hit you all at once. It comes in waves. And it only takes one small thing to knock you under. The breaking point. It was a Saturday. A normal, boring Saturday. I had gone grocery shopping, done laundry, even worked out for the first time in weeks. And then, on my way home, I saw it. A woman walking ahead of me. Blonde hair, pulled into a messy ponytail. A leather jacket I recognized. For half a second, my heart stopped. Because my brain convinced me it was her. That Emily was right there, walking in front of me. That she would turn around and smile at me like nothing had ever happened. That she would be mine again. I don't know what kind of sick joke my mind was playing on me, but I felt my entire body tense. I didn't want to miss her. I didn't want her. But something in me still ached. Then the woman turned. And it wasn't Emily. Of course, it wasn't Emily. I felt like an idiot. But more than that, I felt broken. Because in that moment, I realized the truth. No matter how much time passed, no matter how many times I told myself I was over her, she was still there. Lingering. Waiting. Like a ghost I couldn't shake. The recovery. I needed help. Not the drink whiskey alone and stare at the wall kind of help. Real help. So, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went to therapy. I sat across from a stranger and told her everything. I told her about the night I found out. The way I followed Emily to that hotel, the way I confronted her, the way she begged me to stay. I told her about Matt. About the texts. About the moment he said he loved her. And I told her about my guilt. Because yeah, I was angry. Yeah, I hated what Emily did to me. But part of me still wondered. Did I drive her to it? Was I a bad husband? Did I ignore her needs? Did I miss the signs? My therapist listened. She let me spiral. Then, when I was done, she said something I'll never forget. You are responsible for your part in the relationship. But you are not responsible for her betrayal. It was so simple. And yet, I had never thought about it like that. I wasn't perfect.
I wasn't blameless. But Emily had choices. And she chose to cheat. She chose to lie. She chose to throw away what we had instead of trying to fix it. That wasn't on me. That was on her. The new beginning. The change wasn't instant. I didn't wake up the next day completely healed. But something inside me shifted. I stopped waking up thinking about her. I stopped expecting her texts. I stopped replaying the past in my head, trying to rewrite it. And little by little, I started living again. I went out with friends. I picked up old hobbies. I started taking care of myself again, not just physically, but mentally. And then, one night, something happened. I met someone. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't some grand, movie-style romance. It was just a conversation. A woman at a bar, laughing at my stupid joke. A moment of connection. Something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. I didn't rush into anything. I wasn't ready for that. But for the first time in months, I realized something. I was going to be okay. Maybe not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But someday. And that was enough.